topics.
We are indeed. Many thanks, Luke Brown in the newsroom. It's time for The World This Week. 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour with us. Neither rain nor sleet nor snow can keep Craig Capitas away. We're having a snowstorm in Paris, just so you know. Craig Capitas of Courts in the Atlantic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Not too out of breath?
No, but the French need to know how to deal with snow.
Okay. Also with us, Nicholas Norbrook of the Africa Report. How are you, sir?
Good, thanks. Very well.
You're just back from closing this week's edition.
Yeah, in fact, we'll be straight back to the office after this. We're doing a big thing on the philanthrocrats, the big foundations going into Africa today. So that'll be hitting the press in a matter of hours.
All right. France24.com's managing editor, Sylvain Attal. Welcome back, sir.
Good evening. The snow needs to learn how to deal with France.
There you go, the French perspective. Hang tough, my friend.
And Ulrike Kolterman, freelance reporter, former bureau chief here in Paris and in Africa for the German news agency DPA. Welcome back to all of you. The World This Week, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag TWTW. When we went to air just 1 week ago, the French president announced boots on the ground in Mali. Now the world's attention is on neighboring Algeria, a major natural gas facility near the Libyan border, the site of a hostage situation involving dozens of foreign nationals, bloody raids by Algerian forces, and a heap of questions. There you see the site in Amenas, with journalists kept far at bay, reenactments of the attack, first on the residential compound, then on the gas export site itself, really shedding little light on how authorities at a plant that's jointly run by the Algerians, British Petroleum and the Norwegian Statoil found themselves so caught off guard. Accounts of what happened may have been confusing, but the analysis out of Algiers, well, that's been quite clear.
The objective is clear. It is to directly involve Algeria in the armed conflict, in the war that is taking place in Mali. They will not succeed in dragging us into this war, but our land forces are there to defend our borders.
And above all else, Sylvain Attal, this has really been a public relations nightmare, of course, for the Algerians.
For the Algerians, yes, I don't think that they care a lot of public relation, you know. That's the main difference with democracies. If you want to talk about this particular problem, public relation. But the other thing is that, of course, it was very brutal. It is very brutal as it's still underway. But I'm wondering whether there was another option, because seemingly the terrorists were trying to take away the hostages, and there's hundreds of hostages. It's a mega hostage crisis. And I really have difficulties to figure out how another country would have dealt with that.
Public relations on all sides, everyone trying to spin this. Just a few hours ago, France 24's Arabic language service able to speak to someone close to the leader of that jihadist group, and saying they were speaking from a satellite phone, saying that there were foreign militants in the commando, including Canadians, they say, and also saying that they had planned it long in advance, Nicholas Norbrook, but this is all about Mali. So it's a bit of a contradiction.
It wouldn't surprise me. Since the end of the war, it started in the early 1990s and finished around the turn of the century, between Islamists on the one side and the generals who had seized power in Algeria post the aborted elections in 1991. Since that ended, there's been the embers of various Islamist groups which have existed in this no man's land in between Algeria and Mali. And these people have been there for a long time. They've really bedded down into local communities. There are networks which have been running guns and cocaine and arms all around the Sahel for a couple of decades. So they know how to take hostages. They've been doing this for a long time. I'm sure they would be saying it's been planned long in advance. At the same time, this particular guy, Mokhtar Belmokhtar, who we all thought was dead, in fact, a while back, and then we thought that they'd been split off from the main units. People are speculating, did he do this slightly off the cuff to try and show everyone that he was still relevant? I think that the real lesson of the last 24 hours is we just don't know. There's so much speculation that's going on. We've seen, I mean, as we were talking earlier, the actual numbers involved of hostages and dead, we have no idea. You know, it's always a good idea to allow 24 hours before trying to confirm news. But in terms of this, I think it shines a spotlight on a real lacuna for the international community, for France, for everyone who's sort of woken up to the fact that the Sahel has been ignored for 2 decades. We ignored Afghanistan for a long time. Look what happened.
Ulrike Coleman?
I'm not surprised at all that it has been planned for a long time, because Mali has been planned for a long time. The French government was preparing public opinion for months and months, and even the trip by President Hollande to Algeria was part of the Mali
Back in
strategy.
December last month.
So Algeria is a key player in the whole conflict. Algeria is necessary because the French need to use the airspace, and all the Islamists can easily retire and cross the borders. So Algeria is very important, and it's no surprise that they had to plan it for a long time, obviously, because it's such big dimension, but they might have chosen the right moment to attack because they get a maximum of attention.
Craig Capiz, let me get this from the horse's mouth, because when France put those boots on the ground, it didn't get much of a blip on the U.S. TV networks. Suddenly now, with U.S. hostages, you're just back from New York.
It was a 180-degree turn. You know, the United States once again woke up, to discover that Al-Qaeda is not just a boys' band with Kalashnikovs, as they've thought for all too long. Look, you talk about the importance of Algeria. The one thing you realize when you are in the States for a few weeks, you're talking to people don't give a hoot about Algeria. What they care about is the energy. That's what Hollande cares about. They don't care a hoot about the Algerian people. Number two, the major powers have yet to figure out how to take down these terrorist groups. They just don't know how to do it. Anyone could have told you that these isolated, remote facilities that produce energy were targets, but there was no protection around them. One would have thought that type of protection would have been done long ago, and it wasn't. And I think you're going to see more of this.
And further to Nicholas Norbrook's point about everybody sort of playing catch-up on this story, this was supposed to be the day, this Friday, the British Prime Minister was to make a major speech on the UK's future in Europe in The Hague. Instead, David Cameron briefing the Commons on Algeria that prompted this remark from Katrina on Facebook. I suppose that's better than saying the dog ate my speech. Headless and chicken spring to mind as her reaction. Katrina's remark, a nod to the fact that Cameron's more than ever caught out between Eurosceptic backbenchers and a growing number of UK citizens that want to stay in the EU. So Cameron able to talk about Algeria, and in his remarks, toning down London's initial anger over Algerian authorities' decision to go into that hostage situation, guns ablazing. Other nations, Japan most notably, still fuming, calling the army assault regrettable. Tokyo summoning the Algerian ambassador as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe cut short a visit to Indonesia.
Well, the fascinating thing about that is that a lot of nations were initially, and some, as we see, still are very angry about the fact that Algeria went in all guns blazing. And I think the last nation to claim that it wasn't informed by the Algerians was France. We heard today the French saying, oh no, we didn't know either. And a lot of eyebrows have been raised. And I suspect the French and Algerian security services have been working hand in glove in the last few months.
Yeah. But it only shows that Paris can't afford to criticize Algeria because they are dependent on their cooperation in Mali.
Of course we can afford it. Because, talking about public relations, I noticed that the level of criticism against Algeria is exactly in proportion of on the number of hostages that the nations have on the ground.
And the distance.
You know that the French probably don't have a lot of hostages. They're not criticizing Algeria. The British have a lot of hostages. They're criticizing strongly Algeria.
So the Japanese,
but
perhaps.
Yes, and the Japanese. But what would have been done in this in the same situation, confronting such a crisis? And the second thing I'd like to take your ball, Craig, is it's worse than that. The difficulty to cope with the Islamists or the jihadists is that we're totally schizophrenic on this matter. Remember, we've been helping the Salafists in Libya. In Syria, we're continuing to help the opposition to Bashar al-Assad, in which there's a bunch of jihadists and Salafists. And here in Mali, we're fighting them. So where is the coherency of this
There's no intelligence.
There's no intelligence.
There's none. I mean, the idea of, the French intelligence agency, the folks up at La Piscine, contradiction in terms. Their intelligence is woeful. The same with MI6. The same if there's Japanese intelligence agencies. Anyone and what they gather intelligence about now is really important to realize. All they care about is intelligence that's related to energy and the flow of global energy. And for these intelligence agencies not to understand that these huge facilities are at risk is mind-boggling.
Well, interestingly, in this decade of civil war in Algeria, these gas installations existed then. 10 years of war, 10 years of horrific bombings carried out. Not one attack on the oil and gas installations.
And that raises another question, and it's been raised: is Algeria's president singing from the same hymn sheet as his military on this issue? Are they all working together, or is the military doing its own thing in its own corner when it comes to protecting these sites?
Again, we don't know exactly, but obviously there's a history of problematic relationship between the FLN, the
ruling
government,
party.
the ruling party in Algeria, and the military, and but probably the Algerians are totally schizophrenic too, because they have to fight the jihadists, and on the other hand, they have a reluctancy towards France, the former colonial power, intervening in their backyard.
We should probably point out, at this point that, as you say, there's a difficulty between political leaders and military leaders in Algeria, and just as there was a handover in Turkey to civilian leadership in the 80s, there's a handover to the politicians, but the deep state remains very powerful in Algeria. And not only that, but they were happy to push Salafists out into this no-man's land. But also, Algerian military chiefs made a little money on the side on some of the contraband.
You mentioned the money, and it's not just, by the way, the Western intelligence services or public opinion in here that's schizophrenic. The leader of the group holding the hostages, Mokhtar Belmokhtar, who lost an eye in Afghanistan, he recently broke away from the main branch of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. He's a radical who allegedly operates out of northern Mali, but also stands accused of being quite the canny smuggler, earning the nickname of Marlboro Man. And somewhere in the sands of the Sahara, the lines sometimes get blurred between jihad and profiteering, as exemplified by this cartoon that was published in the Algerian press in Liberté. The south of Algeria is very rich. There you see on the sign it says petroleum, gas, hostages. And
I'm not buying that, because I think that you don't go into such an operation, huge hostage operation, without serious ideological motives. It's not just for money, or because you're not going to be able to negotiate for money or for.
You make a lot of money with hostages. I mean, they pay.
Yeah, not in this kind of situation with the Algerians. They're not willing to negotiate, and you take a few French hostages, maybe in Niger or in Mali, and then trying to this. Yes, you can do for money. But not hundreds of hostages in Algeria. I mean, there's it's nonsense.
I think
I think that the main reason for this operation for Mokhtar Belmokhtar was publicity.
And I think it's important to mention the French hostages, because they are mentioned in the French media, but sometimes they seem to forget they also work for energy companies. They work for the uranium mines in Niger.
Yeah.
So there is obviously a link, and it's been a while that they've been taken hostage, and it illustrates how easy it is and how vulnerable is France, because they can't send their their army, their very, very modern planes and drones and everything, but they can't really protect everyone against hostage taking.
I think that's a critical point. That the fact is that France's economy, to some extent, runs on cheaper electricity through nuclear power, and a significant proportion of that comes from Niger, next door to Mali. I can see why the French got very uncomfortable when an Islamic mini-state was created in northern Mali.
Yeah, I mean, they tell them we had to go in because they were about to take Bamako. But so what? Let's be cynical. If the Islamists had taken Bamako, bad news for the people there. But is it really worse than what is happening in Syria? And who is going to send troops to Syria? No one. So there's obviously another reason behind.
They're all spinning their wheels on this because none of the Western powers wants to go into any of these countries and become the de facto ruler with, creating puppet governments a la Vietnam. Those days are over.
Yeah.
And every time any nation, be it France or the United States, takes a baby step, whether it's like in Mali, to do this, they're going to get spanked. And that's what happened here. They wanted democracy. They got it in Egypt. Okay. Sometimes it's ugly. What's going on in Mali, it's really a question. Do you go in there and you bomb the hell out of them? I mean, let's face it.
No, absolutely not.
All
That's,
right,
that's the kind of outdated attitude. That
Right,
we really,
well, that's the neocon.
We really love to get beyond it.
That's
no
true.
one's talking here about the political situation in Bamako, in southern Mali. That's what we need to be talking about. We need to be talking about the après-guerre. No one's talking about that.
I say there's no
whatsoever.
après-guerre. There is no après-guerre anymore.
They don't care
They
about
don't
it.
care about that.
Right.
This is the new tomorrow that we're dealing with here. These are not nation. Mali. It's on a map. You see it in geography class, and you think, oh, the country of Mali. They have a government. Well, guess what, folks? They don't.
And one reason
They
to
did.
hurry up and to send the troops.
We've got a lot to say. We've got a lot to say about Mali, and we will talk about Mali specifically when we come back. We'll also hear about the fall of an idol, Lance Armstrong confessing, but did he come clean? Stay with us.